Hey Zach, sorry about the technical difficulties we had with this lesson before, so I'm re-recording this lesson for you, so hopefully it works a little bit better this time. As you know, this lesson number 47, it starts on page 187 and it goes over percents less than 100 and percents greater than 100, so that is something new. And they give a quick reminder on these equations. As you know, this equation is the fractional equation, so this refers to a fraction. And when you're figuring out fraction equations, you start with the fraction. F is for the fraction. Of is the word that precedes the base. Okay, so the base or the number that you're starting with goes out there. And is the number that precedes the amount that you end up with. So that you're going to see a very similar theme when you compare the fraction equation to the percentage equation. And this is the same one. B is the same exact one as the other ones that we're doing, except that D refers to decimal. So just a quick review because you've already done those before. And then the nice thing is that raise the roof of the percent equation is exactly the same as those that we just went over. The only difference is that the fraction, instead of fraction, the fraction is going to have a denominator of 100, of course, as you know, because a percent is a number out of 100. And in fact, they mention this in the text that the word percent, you notice, has the word cent in it. And that comes from the Latin word centum, and it literally means by the 100. And that's why there are 100 cents in a dollar, and that's why percent is a number out of 100. So this is the equation that they want you to memorize. So this one is in a thought cloud. So this, of course, means that you have to memorize it. When they refer to it in this chapter of the book, they call it equation C. So I've put equation C right here. This is the one that you need to learn. So it's P over 100 times of equals is. Okay, of is going to refer to the base. As you know, I took a lot of time making this lesson because I thought it was a little bit confusing. Because P in this situation refers to the percent. I know I wrote it above, but I'm going to write it here to emphasize. P is the percent out of 100. Now, of, when you see this word of, this is the word that precedes, that means it comes right before the number that is called the base. And the base is the amount that you're starting with. So for example, it could be if there are 50 questions on a test and you want to know what percent you got, the base is going to be 50 because that's basically the number that you're starting with. It could be the amount of money that you have at the beginning of the problem, and then you have to pay a certain percent out of that. So the base is sort of what would the number be if you were starting with 100% of the money, or if you got 100% on the test, what would that base be? So ask yourself, if there are 50 questions on the test and you got 100%, that number is the base. So that's the base. Or if you had $100 and you got to keep 100% of it, 100 is going to be your base. Okay? Then is, the word is going to precede the word that is the amount or the percentage. And that was really confusing for me because I was like, percentage? Why isn't the percentage over here where the P is? But it's not. It's the number that comes right after the word is. Is precedes the percentage. So, for example, if there are 50 questions on a test and you got 50% right, the 50% goes over here on this P. But the percentage that you got right is going to end up being the number that you got right out of 50. So if you got 50%, the percentage that you got right is 25 because you got 25 out of 50. So is precedes the amount, but it's sometimes called the percentage. So that was a little bit confusing to me, but I think you will understand it now that it's been explained to you. And you'll see some examples as we go and do the problems. Okay, D. This is just a variation of the previous equation because you can see that it's very similar to this. P over 100 times of equals is, right? But if you divide both sides by of, then you are left with, the ofs cancel out and you're left with this equation. So it's just a variation. It's exactly the same, but they do remind us that the is still the percentage or the amount that you have, or maybe it's like the percentage that you have to pay. Like, let's say you have to pay tithing. Is going to precede the percentage that you have to pay, which is the amount that you have to pay. But the percent is, or the rate is always going to be 10%. You have to pay at a rate of 10%. So 10 goes there. Okay, of is the base, the amount of money that you're starting out with. Okay, so hopefully you get that. Here's E and F are just different ways to write that same equation, but sometimes other disciplines like it that way. What I mean by that is if you're a statistics guy, you might do rate times base equals the percentage. This is a little confusing to me because they're saying like the percentage is not the 10% tithing. That would go here for rate, right? The rate would be 10%. The base is the money that you're starting with, let's say $1. And then the percentage that you pay would be 10 cents. Okay, so that's how they would do it in this situation. Okay, so the hint is all of those equations are actually variations of the same equation, and the nice thing is you only have to learn one of them. And if you know one of them, you can sort of derive all the other equations because they're just solving for different parts of the same equation. So the one that they want you to learn is C. And this one is the one that they want you to burn into your brain. So it's, just to emphasize it, it's P over 100 times of equals is. So this one, burn into your hard drive. Okay, you got to know that. Another hint, they're going to ask you to draw some diagrams in these problems, and I don't want you to skip that step. I definitely want you to learn how to draw the diagrams. Okay, so let's jump in. We're going to do example 47.1, and this is on page 188. Okay, it says 20% of what number is 15? So let's just figure out the parts of this problem first. So it starts out with 20%. So we're going to use 20 for percent. So 20 is going to be the P. Okay. And then it says 20% of what number? And remember, of precedes the base. And that's what actually we're solving for. So WN, we're going to put that in for the base, WN. Or the word that comes after of. That's why I circled of. Now is the amount or the percentage. So I'm going to put amount, I'm just going to shorten it, or percentage. I'm not going to shorten this one because I want to emphasize that it's percentage, not the percent. Okay? So then make sure that that makes sense to you. Those are the numbers that we're going to plug in. And if you just plug it into equation C, you end up with this. 20, because there's your P, 20 over 100 times what number? This is in place of because it's 20% of what number. So we put of here, what number, this is your unknown, equals 15. This is the amount that you're left with. Then we just need to solve this equation for what number. So what they do to solve this equation is they multiply both sides by 100 over 20. When you do that, these cancel out, and you are just left with this part because that cancels out. So WN equals 1,500. So it's going to be 1,500 over 20. I know one of those zeros is going to cancel out. Then I'm left with 150 over 2, which is equal to 75. Then I go back. Does this make sense with the problem? I'm going to read the problem again. 20% of what number? So 20% of 75 is 15. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think it does, because if you start out with $75 and you had to pay someone 20% of it, it seems reasonable that you might need to pay them $15. So I would do that just to sort of check yourself and make sure. This is how you do the diagram. The first circle is going to be your base. If you had to pay 100% of the money, or if you got 100% of the test, what is the 100% number? And in this situation, that was what we were solving for, so it's going to be 75. Now, the next part is, what are you left with after? We just figured that this 15%, or this 20% chunk is going to end up being 15. So what is the rest? The rest has to equal 100%. So those have to equal 100%, 80 plus 20. And this, if you add these up, the 15 and 60, those have to equal the base, because that is the 100% number that you started with. So if you realize that you had to give $15 or whatever, then you're going to be left with 60 out of the 75. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. And if it does make sense, then you're having a great day. And the only thing that could make this day better is ice cream, right? So we agree with that. Ice cream always makes things better. All right, let's go on and do 47.2. So this one is also pretty fun because it says what percent. So this time they're doing a variation. They want us to figure out what is P. So P is the unknown. What percent of, this is a key word because this is telling you that the number after it is going to be the base. Is 98. So is also a key word because they're saying that the number that comes right after that is going to be your amount or your percentage. Okay, so now let's solve the problem. These are the things that we're going to plug in. So of course you instantly take equation C out of your head and put it right there. Okay, so that's equation C. You know it off the top of your head, so let's just plug in those numbers. And if I plug in those numbers for P, I am going to put, let me get a different color so I can make it stand out. What percent? So I'm going to put WP because that's the thing we're solving for. And then if I erase of, what is going to go there? Well, the base is going to go there, which is 140. And what about is? What number is going to go there? Is the amount that we're left with, or the percentage, which is 98. In other words, what they're sort of asking here is, let's say that there was a test. There were 140 questions on the test. You got 98 of them right. What percent did you get on the test? Okay, so let's figure that out. So, whoops. Let's just erase this because I want to just do this problem. We're going to be solving for WP. So the way they did it in the book, it's kind of like writing the equation like this. And you know from the commutative property, it's totally okay to rewrite it like this because all you're doing is multiplication and division on this side. So no biggie if you want to change it around like that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change it around. And then I'm going to put equals 98. And then, whoops, I shouldn't have moved it over because let's do it this way. What we're going to do is I'm going to multiply by 100 over 140. Why do I do that? Because this 100 cancels out, this 140 cancels out. But I have to do the same thing to both sides. So I have to multiply this side by 100 over 140. Now, when I do that, all of this cancels out, and I am left with WP is equal to 98 times 100 over 140. And then this is super simple because you just plug that into your calculator, and you are going to get 70%. Now, go back and look. Does that make sense? If you got 98 questions right out of 140, does it make sense that you probably got 70% on the test? Yeah, that does make sense to me. So, oops, I didn't draw the diagrams here, so let's draw the diagrams. What is the base? The base goes in the first one. Or what would you have gotten if you would have gotten 100%? You would have gotten 140 out of 140, okay? Now, let's draw the second part, and I guess I'll draw it here, okay? So what you actually... let's see, what you actually got, whoops, I don't want to do that. What you actually got is the bigger chunk right, because you got the bigger chunk, so you got 98 correct, and you put is 70%. Now, the percentages have to add up to 100. So if I have 70% here, what percent of a chunk did I actually miss on the test? And I missed 30%. And how many did I actually get wrong? Well, it's going to be 140 minus 98, which is 42. And it's 42 is 30%. So that's how they do this diagram. So you've identified the percent that you got correct, the percent that you got wrong, the number you got wrong, the number you got right. Or if it's dollars, then you have dollars in those situations. So anyway, they do want you to do that. So let's just do it. Alrighty, 47.3, we're going to jump into this one. And the question is, 15% of 300 is what number? So I sort of shortened it there. So let's go through and identify the parts. Okay, so let me get a different color here. 15%, this is going to be your P. Now, of is a key word that identifies your base. So 300 is going to be your base. So I can actually put that down here in the diagram of 300. Bam, I already did that step. Now, is what number? Is identifies the amount or the percentage. Percentage. Okay, so now let's plug these in. So for P, I'm going to plug in 15 for 15%. For of, I'm going to plug in my base, which is 300. And for is, that's the unknown that we're solving for, so I'm going to plug in WN for what number. Now, this is just simple arithmetic. It's going to be 15 times 300 divided by 100. So it's actually, you know what? I can make this super easy because I can just cancel out 100 on top and 100 on the bottom, right? The two zeros and the two zeros cancel out, so it's like 15 times 3 over 1, right? So 15 times 3 is basically 45. So the answer is 45. So let's see if that makes sense with the problem. 15% of 300 is 45. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think it does. So if you have $300 and you have to pay 15%, you would have to pay $45. All right, so let's put that in the diagram. $45 is the smaller chunk. So I'm going to put it here. 45 is, and then I'm going to put the percent, 15%. Now, here I have some number is some percent. So that's what I have to figure out for the rest of the diagram. And this is easy because it's going to be 100 minus 15. That number goes there, so that's going to be 85 if I did my math right? And then what number goes here? Well, that's going to be easy too because I take my base and I subtract 45 from that. So if I do 300 minus 45, then it's going to be 255 is the 85%. Okay, perfect. Let's move on to percents that are greater than 100 now. So these are the types of problems you have when the quantity increases. And this is super important for you to learn because in the future when you have lots of money, you might be making investments and you might learn that your investment or that the money you had increased by 150%. So that's important for you to be able to do these problems correctly. Now, remember that the initial quantity is 100%. So the initial quantity is your base, and if you have 100% of your money that you keep, that's your base. Or the base is the total amount of problems you can get right. But it's the number that you start with, and that's going to be represented by 100%. Now, the final percent is going to be greater than 100 if your base increases. All right, so let's jump in and do some of these problems. Let's do example 47.4, and that is on page 189. Okay, and it says, what number is 160% of 60? Work the problem and draw a diagram. Now, this is the easier of all of these problems. They're going to get more complicated, so I want you to pay lots and lots of attention to the next example. But this one I think is going to be pretty straightforward, okay? So let's take a look at the problem. What number is 160%? So the percent is going to be 160. That's going to be our P of 60. So the word of identifies your base, okay? And then what number, instead of is what number, it's what number is, but you could easily rearrange that sentence and say 160% of 60 is what number, and then you would know that what number or the thing that you're solving for is going to be the amount or the percentage, okay? So let's plug those numbers in and see what we get. All right, so instead of P, I'm going to write 160 right here. Instead of, I'm going to write 60 because that's the base that we're starting with. And instead of is, I'm going to write what number because that is what we're solving for. And then this becomes super easy. It's so easy. I'm just going to actually erase that. And you can just plug all of this into your calculator. What is 160 times 60 divided by 100? And if you do that math, you will get an answer of 96. Okay, so now let's draw the diagram and see what it looks like. What is the base that we started out with, or the number that would represent 100%? Okay, because if you didn't make any money, what would be that base? So let's look back at the question. What number is 160% of 60? We already identified that 60 is the base, so that goes there. So it's of 60. All right, what about the next diagram? So the next diagram is actually interesting because it's going to be bigger. So I'm not going to draw it like that, actually. I'm going to draw it like this. And it doesn't have to be to scale. It's just showing that this is a bigger thing than what there was before. So it's a little bit easier in the sense that you just need to write an amount that is a percent. Okay, so the amount is going to be your answer. 96 is, and then you put the 160% there. So this is your after. Okay, and this one's before. All right, that was pretty straightforward. Oh, I guess I should have filled it out there, but that's okay. Oh, and there. All right, either way, we nailed it. Either way, we got it. We got that one covered. All right, so let's do example 47.5. Now this one is the super tricky one, and I had to read this several times before I understood it. So let's read it again very carefully. If 75 is increased by, and these are the key words that made it a tricky problem, is increased by 150%. Because if you're dumb like one of your friends, you're going to say, oh, it just says 150%, so 150% must be my P. But it is not. That is wrong. That is wrong. Because when they said these words, increased by, that means you already took your 100% that you were starting with, and you're increasing it by another 150%. And so your total increase is going to be 250%. And this is the P. Okay, let's read the whole question again and make sure that makes sense. If 75 is increased by 150%, what is the result? Okay, so what is 75? Let's see if we can rearrange the words in that and see what it means. So let's see. What is the, let's see, if 75 is increased by 150%, what is the result? So I would say, if I had to put it in the form of and is, I might rephrase it like, let's see, 250% of what number is 75? If 75 is increased by 150%, what is the result? No, that's wrong, isn't it? Let me try that again. 250% of 75 is what number? 250% of 75 is what number? So let's read it again and see if it makes sense. If 75 is increased by 150%, so that means total of 250, what is the result? So 250% of 75 is what number? Yes, that's correct, because they're saying, let's say you start out with 75 bucks and you invest it and it's increased by 150%. So if 75 bucks you were to get 100% of your money back, you would only get 75 bucks back. So that's not what you want. You want it to increase by more than that. So if it's increased by 150%, what is the result? So you invest 75 bucks, you not only get your 75 bucks back, but you get another 150%. Does that make sense? So you not only get your 100% back, but you also get plus 150% of 75. So that's what they're saying. They're saying you get 100% of your $75 investment back. So you get, whoops, what's happening? Okay, so you get 100% of your $75 investment back, but you also get 150% of it back. That's why the total is 250. So these words increased by are super important, and that's what's telling us that we need to add 150% to the 100%. So be aware of those words and don't just grab this number that's right before the percent and plug that in, because you'll be wrong. Okay, so let's plug in what we know. If we know that 250% of 75 is what number? Okay, so what number is going to go in place of the P? It's going to be 250. Of is going to be 75, because that's the number that we start out with. And then they want to know, what number do we get? So now that you've figured out exactly what you plug in, then it's easy to do. And you're going to end up with 187.5. So you invest 75 bucks, you get 187.5 bucks back. That's an increase of, it's an increase of 150, but it's a total return of 250%. So let's put that into a diagram. You started with 75, and that was the 100%. Now after, you ended up with 187.5, and that is the 250%. Okay, so write me a little note if that one is super confusing, because that one was confusing to me. And the key words to be aware of are increased by. If you see those words, increased by, then read it very carefully, because you might need to add 100% to it, assuming that you got the entire base back already. Okay, let's read example 47.6. I think this one's a little bit more straightforward, so you should get this one right away. What percent of 90 is 306? So this is easy because we're solving for percent. So let's just go through what percent. So that's what we're solving for. So I'm going to put that WP in the place of P. Of means your base. 90 is your base. Is 306, and this is your amount. You can tell already that it goes up by a lot. You can tell that the percent is going to be above 100. So if you don't get something above 100, then you did it wrong, because you went from 90 to 306. So that's a huge increase. That's going to be somewhere around a 300% increase. So that's what we should be looking for, okay? So instead of P, let's put in WP, because that's what we're solving for. Instead of, we're going to put in 90, because that's our base. Instead of is, we're going to put in 306. And then you just solve for WP, which I'm just going to, I tried to do this in multiple steps before, but this is just easier. Okay, so I'm going to, in fact, I'll delete that. Okay, I'm going to multiply this side by 100 over 90, so that this cancels out, and I'm going to multiply this by 100 over 90. Then I'm left with WP equals 306 times 100 divided by 90, and the answer is going to be 340%. Perfect. Now let's do our diagram. Before, our base was 90, okay? After, we've got this huge thing, 306 is 340%, okay? Perfect. All right, that's basically it, Zach. Oh, bottom. I had to do that one because of all the times that, because of all the times that we've drawn this. I mean, what would they think of that looks like, right? Okay, so have fun doing your math. Sorry about the technical difficulties before this. Good luck. Okay, bye.